Thank the gentleman from Texas. I'll recognize myself last. Ms. Hakes, there's a special bond among prosecutors in Congress, frankly, on both sides of the aisle. There's a really small chance that our previous jobs will enable us to go to heaven, so we are united in that. But Johnny and Judge Poe put their finger on it. More than anything else, we're united in our inability to get the images out of our heads. And Johnny's got them, and Judge Poe has them, and you have them, and any of us who did child pornography or child sex abuse cases. And it's not just the physical imagery of the abuse. It's trying to qualify a kid to testify. I mean, I hear the word children used. We refer to them as juveniles, not children. There's no children's court in South Carolina. There's a juvenile court. If you're a child and you don't know the difference between right and wrong, you're not going to be prosecuted, but you're also not going to be able to testify. So trying to get a 4 or 5 or 6-year-old kid qualified to testify in his or her own abuse case, that's the image that I'm sure you still, as well as a defense attorney positioning himself or herself so that child has to look at the perpetrator while he or she is telling what happened to him. So I go last because I want to encourage my colleagues to come, and they were great today in their participation, but I also want to kind of close up any loose ends. When I hear the term children, there is no children's court in South Carolina. There's a juvenile court, and it is for those under the age of 16. And there is a judge. So not only do you have to have a conviction, you have to have a judge exercise his or her discretion to put that person on a registry. And you put your finger on it. A registry is a notification document. The public is hereby notified that this happened. Mr. Sheehan, if there is an 8-year-old, as Ms. Pittman says there is, if there is an 8-year-old that is on the sex offender registry for life, that 8-year-old needs a new lawyer, not a new law. They need a new lawyer. I'd be curious if the marshals found any 8-year-olds that are on the sex offender registry for life. And I would love a list of all 8-year-olds who are on the sex offender registry for life. Because they need a new lawyer, or else it's the most egregious fact pattern an 8-year-old has ever committed. Detective Beaver, I said you and I would come back to this. This is what I want you to do for me. We won't do it today, and I got to get the permission of the chairman of the full committee, who's already not happy with me because I had him in California and not Virginia. But if we can work through that, this is what I want you to do for me. I want you to give me a list of the providers that are giving you a hard time. We may have another hearing. We may let them come and publicly explain why they are having a hard time complying with law enforcement in child exploitation and child abuse cases. My guess is that would be a very tough public explanation for them. So give me the names of the providers that you're having a hard time dealing with. And I may not can make them do it, but I can make them come and explain why they're doing it. And my guess is they won't want to do that. Their customers, 99.9% of their customers would expect them to work with you, not to thwart you. In my remaining time, Ms. Hakes, I want you mentioned the child advocacy centers. Not only are they indispensable in the prosecution of child exploitation and child sex abuse cases, at least in South Carolina, an alarming number of them are not even funded at the state level. So, would you agree with me that having someone particularly trained in prepping witnesses for trial is an indispensable aspect to your success as a prosecutor?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, absolutely 100%, indispensable.
All right, so we have the victim component where they are entitled to certain rights as the victim. You have the indispensability of the necessity of their testimony at trial, all of which is a law enforcement function, all of which is a state function. So why are the states and the counties not funding what is primarily a state crime?
Because they're cheap and kids don't vote. Unfortunately, I truly believe that. You've got Like I said, there are 795-ish certified by the National Children's Alliance Child Advocacy Centers around the country, and the vast majority of them have to seek private funding to keep the doors open. There's no excuse for it. I don't understand the lawmakers in the states. The federal government gives some money to the National Children's Alliance, and they, in turn, dole a very small amount of money out to these centers, but they're seeing hundreds of thousands of kids every year, and I guarantee that's one of the reasons why kids recant, are incapable of testifying, don't get up on the witness stand. So that's why, even though you have a number of cases brought, they never lead to a conviction, because children need advocacy centers and a child-friendly process to go through this very difficult system, and they don't have it.
And you would agree with me that these are among the very toughest cases of all to prosecute. So you're either going to have a child as your star witness, or you're going to have a pediatrician, preferably highly trained in being able to detect indications of abuse. But I never once had DNA in an incest case or a child sex abuse case. It's a witness, and it's an expert, and it's maybe a forensic therapist. Oftentimes, all of them come out of the Children's Advocacy Center, and very little money is dedicated to that at the state and local level, and I find it astonishing. I'm out of time. I'll tell you what I would benefit from, based on your experience as a prosecutor. If there are investigatory, procedural, or evidentiary things that you think Congress should look at, for which we have jurisdiction, that would level the playing field for child victims. And I'm thinking about everything from the legality of allowing a child to testify behind a veil, where they don't get stared at by the perpetrator and 12 adults they've never met before. Any of that that you have in your experience that has leveled the playing field for victims, I would greatly appreciate your sharing it with me, and I know my friends on both sides would as well. So,
Yes, sir, thank you.
I'll recognize Mr. Conyers if he has any closing remarks.
No, sir.
Okay. Well, I want to thank the witnesses especially for coming. There's not a more important topic that we will deal with. So thank you for your expertise. Thank you, all four of you, for the way that you spend the other 364 days out of the year. And if you have suggestions on what we can do to help or make it better, no matter whether it's the registry for juveniles or investigation, prosecution, hotline, you name it, let us know. And with that, we are adjourned.